So what's new with the new Apple TV 4th Gen? Well, on paper there's a lot to talk about, but in reality it doesn't really feel all that much different to the last Apple TV. First of all, it's had a big bump in the specs. We go from an old A5 processor to a much newer, if not quite cutting edge, A8 chip. That's the same one that's in the iPhone 6 and the 6 Plus. The RAM has also been quadrupled to 2GB, which helps with the new multitasking feature. The new Apple TV also now supports 1080p playback at 60 frames per second. That's up from 30 FPS on older models, which will be handy for YouTube content and games. But it does seem odd, and it's a bit of a shame that there's absolutely no 4K support of any kind, especially as other devices like the Nvidia Shield and Roku 4 support 4K 60. Most of us won't really care about 4K that much right now, but supporting it would certainly have future-proofed the Apple TV 4th Gen for a bit longer. In terms of the design, the new Apple TV is a lot heavier and nearly twice as tall as the 3rd Gen model. There's not a lot new in terms of connections either. It's the same power port, which means it's a straight swap. If you have the old one, you can just plug in straight into the same power cable. It also has the same full-size HDMI and Ethernet ports, but what they have done is they've swapped the micro USB for a fancy new USB Type-C, which is great for future devices, but there's still no standard USB 3 or even a card reader, so without USB Type-C adapters, the Apple TV is still a little sparse in terms of inputs. Strangely, we've also lost the optical audio port, which was useful for connecting older sound systems, which we do have on the older 3rd Gen model. So just looking at it, there's not a great deal to get excited about, but once you turn it on, you'll see the most important new feature, tvOS. Running a whole new operating system, the new Apple TV uses tvOS rather than the old Apple TV 6.1 software. That's not particularly interesting in itself, but along with being much smoother, faster, and more responsive to use, it is a lot nicer. It now supports Siri and, much more importantly, an App Store. Here in the UK, we have the usual iTunes, Netflix, and TED, but not a great deal else actually, unless you're a big fan of the NHL or WWE. The good news is that it has been confirmed that iPlayer and Sky's Now TV will be coming soon. But without Amazon Prime, iTV Player, 4OD, Sky Go, Plex, or Pandora in the UK at least, there's still not a lot to watch on the Apple TV unless you already have a huge collection of iTunes videos and movies or willing to rent or buy them regularly from the store. To be fair though, this isn't really that different than previous Apple TVs, so if you've been using those then you'll know what you're going to get. What is new and most exciting is the apps, the games. You can finally play Crossy Road on your big TV. It even supports multiplayer. If you prefer racing games, Asphalt 8 looks great and runs really well as well. So how do you control these apps and games? Well, with the new Siri Remote controller. For racing games, you can use it a bit like a Wii Remote, steering using the built-in gyroscope and accelerometer. For simpler games, or to navigate around menus, you simply move your finger over the new glass trackpad at the top of the remote. It's incredibly nice to use, it's fast, it's accurate, and it's a much better way of controlling the Apple TV than the previous remotes. As well as having a menu, play, pause, and volume buttons, the remote also has a dedicated button to activate Siri. Overall though, the remote is a nice upgrade. The trackpad feels great, it's comfortable to hold, and is easily recharged using a lightning cable which is bundled in the box, or you could use the same one you use to charge anything from the iPhone 5 upwards or recent iPads. Going back to the App Store, the main problem is it's not the same App Store as you get on your iPhone or your iPad. Developers have to optimize and update their apps to support tvOS, which the Apple TV runs, and so at launch there isn't really a great deal of interesting games to play. It will of course grow and get better with time, but it's worth remembering that for now the vast majority of apps you may be used to using on your iPhone or your iPad simply aren't available for the tvOS. On a more positive note, Siri has finally been added to Apple TV. Pressing and holding the microphone button on the remote brings up Siri, where you can ask it to launch an app or a game, play a movie, find films with specific actors, and even skip ahead or rewind movies and videos by 30 seconds or a few minutes, for example. I find it most useful to ask Siri to start playing something like Siri, play Edge of Tomorrow, and a few seconds later it would begin playing the film. So I found this a lot quicker than having to go into my iTunes app and then go into Purchase tab and then playing it that way. It did save quite a few seconds, I would say. While asking Siri show me action films will bring up links to relevant movies on Netflix or iTunes, most of the time it will send you just straight to iTunes, where you can have options to rent or buy the content. This is largely down to the limited variety of other entertainment apps, and it always feels like Siri is trying to get me to buy something from the iTunes store. It just feels like everything is behind a bit of a price wall. Generally though, Siri is a nice addition. You can ask it for the time, for sports scores as you'd expect, but really it's just a convenient way of more quickly accessing content. Although I would say it still doesn't feel fully fleshed out, and too often it will only work in the way you'd expect, in sort of a contextual way, when you're within certain apps like YouTube or Netflix. The new multitasking feature also helps you to navigate around. A double press of the home button on the Siri Remote activates the mode which lets you swipe between apps you've recently had open. In the same way as you would on your iPhone or your iPad, you can even swipe up to close apps down. It is actually pretty handy to be able to quickly jump between games, apps and movies, and thanks to the improved hardware, it's pretty quick as well. So the new Apple TV has better hardware, it has a more intuitive user interface, it has apps, multitasking, the new Siri Remote, and so there's quite a lot of new stuff with the 4th gen Apple TV, yet it doesn't really feel that much different to the older models. Apple has marketed this as the future of TV, but it doesn't really feel that way. There's so many smart TV boxes on the market, from the Roku 4, Nvidia Shield, Amazon Fire TV, Chromecast, and of course even games consoles like the Xbox One and PS4. It's kind of difficult to see how the Apple TV really stands out. The lack of 4K support, the fairly long loading times between opening apps and movies don't really help either. So for me, the bottom line is the new Apple TV, while being the nicest and easiest to use Apple TV ever, except for a fairly limited range of apps available in the new App Store, fundamentally it's the same as previous generations of Apple TVs, far from being the future of TVs. The 32GB model costs £129, which is $149, and so I would say if you do regularly use an Apple TV already and are happy with the services it provides, I would highly recommend upgrading, because it really is a lot nicer to use. If you are on the fence about it, perhaps you don't own one yet, you're not sure, I'm not really sure it is worth the investment, especially if you already have either a smart TV, a games console, or even a Chromecast. So this has been my review of the latest 4th gen Apple TV. Do let me know what you think of it, whether you think you'll be upgrading, maybe you'll buy one, in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe, and I'll catch you again on the Tech Chap. Cheers guys.